Hi and welcome to video number 1 of my gearbox rebuild. We did 4 videos on stripping it down. Since then, which was quite a while ago, we have cleaned the gearbox. As you can see, it's immaculately clean, almost as good as new. It's been aqua blasted, which is high pressure water with glass bead inside and out, and then it's been jet washed down within an inch of its life to clean it, to remove all the glass bead. It's very fine glass bead, and you need to get it all out. If you leave any in, it doesn't go very well with bearings and any machinery parts. And while we were cleaning it, we did notice that the two of the holes that hold the transfer case on were actually fitted with UNF bolts, and when you're in aluminium, it should be UNC. It should be a coarse thread, not a fine thread. Not sure why or who did this in its previous life, but anyway, after seeking advice, we re-tapped them using helicoils, which are in now. They're not quite finished off because they've got to go down one turn and got to knock the tangs off. And there was also another one which the thread was not looking pretty good, particularly good, so I re-tapped that one with a helicoil as well. What we've also done in preparation is I purchased a selection of UNC and UNF taps and cleaned out all of the threads in the gearbox, just to clean them out, make sure there's no swarf or anything, any muck left in there. So we've done that as well, and then we sprayed the inside of the gearbox with WD-40 just to present the outside of the gearbox. Some people paint them. I don't like painted aluminium, so I'm going to opt to go for some ACF 50, which is a preservation spray, and we'll get that sprayed on the gearbox when it's ready to go. So we've helicoiled using a helicoil kit. It's actually not helicoil. Helicoil is a trade name. This is a V-coil kit. We used a Kronos kit, but it's very similar. This one's a slightly better quality one. Comes with a drill, which you drill out the hole, tap, which is a 5/16 UNC STI tap. It's not 5/16 in size. I think it's about 3/8. It has to be bigger than the final thread, and then the coils themselves. We used some slightly bigger ones. These are 1D, which is represents 1 diameter. I ordered some 2D, so they're slightly deeper. So it's all helicoiled up, ready to go. So first job on the video is to fit the bell crank pivot pin, which is the piece that goes in the bottom here. It's an interference fit. It's currently sitting in the freezer to cool it down, which will shrink the metal, and I'll warm this area up here with a hot air gun, and then it should pop in with a new O-ring, which comes with the gearbox rebuild kit that I've got off guessworks.com from John Guess. So that's the first job. Get on with that. Put the pivot pin in, and then put the gear selector gear selectors in, and a few other jobs which I'll talk about in a bit. Okay, so I'm just going to pop off to the house and grab that out of the freezer. Okay, so we've got the bell crank pivot housing in here. I'll put it in a freezer bag, and it's just wrapped up in a couple of polythene bags there just to protect the food in the freezer. We've got a nylon hammer, and we are going to put this in here. So take this out of here. Okay, a quick wipe off. Don't want to leave it too long so it doesn't warm up. Okay, it is actually quite cold, it's still freezing. Okay, I'm going to put a bit of lubricant around the sides of the in there, get the O-ring, which was there, pop the O-ring on, which just fits around nicely down there, and make sure the O-ring's seated down. You don't want to catch it. Pop it on there and give it quite a tight fit, surprisingly. Thought it'd be a bit easier than that. That's it in there nicely, and you'll see it down the bottom there. Yeah, it's nice and flush. If you don't change the O-ring, you do get an annoying oil leak out the bottom there. Okay, so that's it in, and we'll move on to the next stage. And while we're building this gearbox, it's been recommended again by John Guess, the gearbox guru, to use a gearbox assembly lubricant. I asked the question thinking, well, we do it for engines, the block and whatever, you use assembly lube. What about gearboxes? Do we use gearbox standard engine oil, etc.? And he recommended the Miller's assembly lubricant. So that's what I'm using. It's just I guess a type of oil which just dissipates into the oil when you put it in the engine. So I've put it in my trusty Castrol oil can, and we'll use that when assembling the gearbox. Okay, the next part to go in then is the gear selector shaft assembly. Quite simple. I'm just going to put some oil in there. Okay, get that in there. Yeah, quite a thick assembly lubricant, which is obviously what you think you're going to need. Okay, get around the outside there, and then this just drops through this hole here. Okay. And it goes. I'm not 100% sure which way it's supposed to go or how far it's going. I think it sits in there and it's held in by the spring and pin, which we'll put in a bit. I should have mentioned this at the start of the video, but I've made sure that my work area here, I've taken it all off, cleaned it all, brushed it, blown it out, put some clean paper down, just make sure everything's immaculately clean, because we don't want any gunk crud getting into the gearbox whilst we're doing the build. I also, just before I started, realised that some of the parts, like the bell crank pivot pin and a few of the selector shaft sleeve here, and the thicker, extra thick wash that sits on top, and a few extra bits and pieces like the circlet, the pinion nut, and a few other bits and pieces were not clean when I took the rest apart. I cleaned everything else apart from that. So I just spent a bit of time this morning just dipping it in my light citric acid solution, cleaned it up, dried it off and oiled it, and yeah, lovely. Okay, so next part of the assembly is the selector teeth here. Okay, the first one that goes in is this one, which is the reverse gear selector. So that fits onto this shaft. Okay. Okay, that goes on there, and then goes the washer. Ooh. Okay, yeah, we'll stick a washer on there. Spacer. Then we get the centre tooth, which is got double tapered either side. That fits onto there. We'll work out which way up it goes actually. I need to check that. It does have it's got a double taper, but then on the tooth side there it's got a flat area. Should have kept it together. And then, yeah, sorry, the smooth machined face goes downwards, and then this one here, we've got taper on one side. Sorry, we forgot to put a spacer in into there. Another spacer, and then it's all pretty oily anyway. I've had it in press. It's in WD-40 though, so I'm gonna get some proper oil on. And that piece there. So when it's all together, you'll see that the reverse gear taper points upwards. The center one, which I think is the third and fourth gear, is tapered either side, and it sits in the center, and then the top one is tapered downwards, which is the next gear slit. So that's all ready to go on. Then we stick that onto the bell crank pin. Let's move this out of the way. Yeah, I should move that out of the way. It'll be in there. Okay, that's all moving nicely. Okay, and then last piece that goes on is the thicker washer spacer. I've not renewed that. It's got a few light marks on from the nut, but it's fine to go back on again. And then a brand new 3/8 nut, which is in this bag of bits from the gearbox rebuild kit. Dropping anything else. I'll take that one in with it. Okay, yeah, brand new 3/8 nylon nut. We'll get that on there. And we'll get that, oh, sweating here, sweating into the gearbox. And we'll get that tightened up. Don't think there's a torque setting for it, but I will check. Just been watching one of the Mini Mania gearbox rebuilds videos, and I've also been watching a Med Engineering one. They only do the straight cut gears version, but it's the same. And I hadn't put the the detent sleeve and spring and ball bearing in, which holds the gear selector shaft in place. Sorry, I've forgotten the correct name for it. So I've had to undo the bell crank levers and reassemble that part. I'm just going to put this in now, a bit of oil. That goes in there. It just holds the selector shaft in place, and then there's a ball bearing. The ball bearing just sits there. That just stops. Sorry, that helps to hold the gear selector shaft in its various positions. Put the spring in, hold behind it, and there's a little trick here. So I've just got a piece of metal that came off of an exhaust mount, and I think it's a 1/4 UNC bolt on there. I'm just going to use one of the diff output shaft housings just to hold the detent spring in place. You can't see this, so I apologise. I'm just going to hold that in place there, and that just stops the spring coming out, and then we can just check that we've got movement. We did have, yeah, there we go. Okay, that's nice. Okay, obviously it doesn't move floppy. So that's all that nice there and tight in place. And I've also asked about doing up the 3/8 nut on the bell crank pivot post. It doesn't seem to be a torque figure, and it's just a question of doing up nice and firm just to stop the assembly moving up and down. Okay, next up is the gear selector forks, and again I gave these a bit of a aquablast when we're doing that. So we've got the two forks and there, and we've got the shaft and the pin that fits through the side. So first thing, I've given this a bit of an oil up just to check that. First thing, check it goes through the shaft nicely. Yep, that's cool. And I also checked to see that it went through these as well, just in case. Yep, cool. Okay, so we put the shaft, just pop the shaft there. Can't beat a bit of lube. Shaft on there. I'm going to work out the way these forks go, and I believe obviously the one with the pinhole, which is that one, that fits furthest over there. So I'm going to put some assembly oil, just pop that in its place there, and then this one goes, I'm just referring to the Rover build manual here. This one goes this way around with the longest piece pointing to the far side there. Okay, so again, bit of lube in there, in place, and the idea is to, we've got the recesses here where the bell crank lever teeth fits in. It's just a question of pushing the pin, sort of roughly putting them in place like that. There. Yep. Quite fiddly. Lining it up with the pin, lining it up with the shaft, sorry. Put the teeth in place and put the first one through, and then get the next one fits underneath it. In line with it, that's it. Underneath it, work out where the pinhole is, get it the right way up. Nope, nope, not come through yet. Where's the pinhole? There it is there. Get the pinhole uppermost, pop it through, and I'm going to use a scribe here just to feel for it. I hadn't pushed it far enough in, so push it a bit further in, and I started off with a small punch, and I've got my brass punch, and quite a firm fit. Get it lined up nicely. I'm worried about hitting them not too far. I haven't driven it all the way in, and I will seek some advice just to ask a question before I drive it all the way in. But that's in there now. Gear selector forks are on, and they're lined up on the teeth there. Okay, so that's as far as I'm going to go for the time being. We've got the interlock spool, which is the correct name for it. That's in. It's currently being held in temporarily with the detent sleeve and spring, and then we've got the selector shaft in. We've got the bell crank lever levers in, excuse me, and the gear selector forks in, and they're all in nicely, all connected up, ready for the next stage.